I'm Kay Ivey. If Joe Biden keeps shipping illegal immigrants into our states, we all gonna have to learn Spanish. My message to Biden. The left can try to cancel me, I don't care. But here in Alabama, we're gonna enforce the law.
You're listening to.
Y'all are listening to What's Left of the South.
You can do what you want. Don't listen to him.
Well, that's a great intro. Thank you for tuning in to What's Left of the South, a podcast about Southern working class history, current events through a leftist perspective. This podcast is brought to you by new tax brackets, testosterone levels, anxiety, living at home, aging parents, Kai's war against the British Empire, Nelson finally getting a real job moving out of his mom's house, Tyler's hiatus, which will inevitably lower our listener count, and Governor Meemaw's beer belch. We got to get that at the beginning of the episode. As always, I'm Nelson with...
And I'm depressed.
And I can't think of a good one. I'm sorry.
Anxious.
Yeah, this is sad. I was gonna pick something more like zany, like I don't know. I'm
It's okay.
having caffeine withdrawals.
Oh my God. And our guest this evening is longtime friend and listener.
Hi, I'm Dawson. Dawson Hicks.
Yay!
I work with Project Hope to abolish the death penalty. I'm the special events coordinator. That's my official title. But pretty much I help organize like protests. We do petition deliveries, rallies, vigils, just any kind of like direct action. And that's my thing.
Yay!
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
No problem. It's been forever since we've done an episode, an actual
Yes,
free
we've done an actual episode.
Since we've done an episode. We did the After Dark, where I think we ranted about why the U.S. I ranted about why the USS Arizona is allowed to leak oil into Pearl Harbor.
Not allowed. Not allowed.
Yeah,
It just does it.
Why is it allowed to do this? Why is it still happening? Oh my God. Anyway, if you want to hear that and more, listen, sub to our Patreon. But today, we're going to be talking about a story that has started local and then made its way to national news, and then I actually heard them talking about it at the United Nations. So, Dawson, do you want to just go ahead and fill us in about what's happening? What and Alabama's infinite wisdom and passion and love, according to the teachings of Jesus Christ, has decided to do? Because we're such a devout Christian state that loves everybody and thy neighbor.
Right. Your neighbor.
Yeah. So what is happening at this moment, actually, before we really get into it, I'm going to keep live updates up. So at this moment, we are currently waiting for Kenneth Smith, or Kenny, to be executed by the state of Alabama with nitrogen hypoxia, which is different from like laughing gas, which is nitrous oxide. This is just straight like nitrogen gas. So this has never been done in the country, or we're pretty sure the like entire world. So this is a first, and no one knows what's about to happen. We have no idea, because any protocol, any information that gets released from the state of Alabama is heavily redacted. We don't know exactly how safe it is for people in the room, because there's Jeff Hood, who's his spiritual advisor, and there's a guard in the room as well. So we don't know if that's going to be safe. At this moment, at 6:55 p.m. Central Time, witnesses of the execution have been called to the chamber. They usually say they're going to start the executions at 6 p.m., but Alabama is known to take their time. They'll go late into the evening. Pretty much where we are right now legally is the Supreme Court has denied all of the stays, and the only person that could stop it is Governor Ivey. And we don't have any reason to believe she's going to do that. So it's, it's very grim. It's kind of, we're sitting here, everyone's waiting. Most everyone that we've been working with this week is at Holman right now. That's where everyone is held, at the Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore. So that's where they're having demonstrations. They're doing a live thing right now. They're doing the same thing we're doing, pretty much just waiting to hear that final update. So I'm gonna kind of keep refreshing this, and it's very possible the news will hit while we're talking. So when that happens, I'll let you know. So yeah, it's very depressing. It's kind of hard to talk about without it being very heavy. But I'm going to do my best to keep it just informative. There are parts of it. I guess I should probably say this too. We're going to be talking about crimes, people on death row, and so it's hard stuff. It's murder, assaults, that type of thing. So we'll be talking about some pretty sensitive subjects. So I guess if that's something that might make you uncomfortable, this may not be the one for you. But anyway, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to say before we really get into it.
So I think for people who aren't familiar what's happening, so I follow like a little bit not necessarily the backstory to this case, but what got us to this point, and that is the state of Alabama and a lot of other states that still allow the death penalty could not. Well, everyone knows that a lot of states they've gotten rid of the electric chair, they've gone to lethal injection. But the companies that make the drugs don't make those drugs anymore. So I remember Alabama and some other states were having to do, back channel deals with sanctioned nations to try to get the cocktail of drugs to be able to execute people, and it eventually dried up. And Alabama, along with other states, have tried other methods, and a lot of time, they don't work. Some states have tried to bring back firing squads and hangings. And then there's always the problem with medical personnel willing to do this. A lot of times it's very hard. I know in this particular case and many others to try to find a vein in order to put the needle in order to inject the people with the cocktail of drugs to kill them. That's been an issue. And this particular case was shocking in that Alabama is, I think, the only state that since before 2017 allowed judges to overturn a jury's recommendation. So in this particular case, I know the jury voted 11-1 that he should just get life in prison without parole, but the judge overturned that and said no, he deserves the death penalty. And that was the case until 2017 when that stopped happening. But this case is one of those. And not only did that happen, this is the second time he's going to have to go through execution because the first time was botched. They couldn't find a vein. So this is a very disturbing situation that's happening, and it's taken a long, winding, weird road to get to this point. And from what I also read was that this type of gas has been used in assisted suicides in Europe, I believe, and the person that pioneered that, I think, looked at the mask that Alabama was going to use, and he's like, this is not what you shouldn't use this. We don't know if this is going to fit. This is not going to work, et cetera, et cetera. So like you said in the beginning, there's a lot of unknowns with this. We don't know what the fuck's going to happen because it hasn't been done before. I think Oklahoma and another state want to do this, but they haven't done it yet. They're kind of seeing what's going to happen with Alabama.
Yeah, everyone's kind of just seeing how this goes, seeing how successful it is. One, if it works, that's the big one. And then how much suffering it causes. And then they're kind of going to go from there. So they're definitely doing a test run. That's pretty much what it is. It's a trial. And no one in the Department of Corrections knows what's going to happen. None of us obviously know what's going to happen because they will not release any kind of transparency on their process where they get their drugs from, which is still, that's another thing. It's like, we can't get any information. So we don't know much of anything. We kind of just go off of what we're able to hear, what people tell us, but the official Alabama Department of Corrections never gives out any real information, and anything they do is so redacted. It's pretty much they might as well have said nothing.
So when y'all had the protest at the Capitol the other day, and the governor wasn't there, or what ended up happening with that protest?
Well, I mean, we don't know, because what usually happens is we go into the building, we walk up to like her office, and there's a secretary there. We talk to her, we deliver her the petitions. She just talks to us. I mean, she's nice, she does her job. And then she, from what we know, delivers it to the governor. And then from there, we don't know. I mean, she obviously never says anything. She never comes out and meets us herself. Actually, this most recent one, the spiritual advisor, Jeff Hood, he personally wrote her an invitation saying, if this is going to be safe and this is so great, I invite you to come stand in the execution room with me, and we'll hold hands and we'll pray, and it'll be, a whole time. And I thought, I was like, okay, cool. That was pretty, like, bold, but, we never hear anything. She never comes out herself. She never talks to us. Like, I think it was either that morning or the day before, she was right out on the steps doing something. Her big thing is trying to push like education right now, which I don't know. That's a whole nother
LOL.
topic.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's kind of its own thing. But for all we know, I mean, I don't know why she wouldn't have been there. She's probably just on the other side of the door. I don't know, what it's like beyond those two big doors, because everything's so like big and grand in there. You kind of look around and you see things that really catch your eye, like the star right on the front steps commemorating where Jefferson Davis stood.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, no, I know. And then George Wallace stood there too, so it's just like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, and I'm like,
can you tell us
still
more?
there. Cool.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about the organization and what you guys do and what you all are about?
Yeah, so I'm part of Project Hope to abolish the death penalty, and what we do is we are a death row, like, inmate ran organization. So our board members are all inmates on death row. They're at Holman. And then Esther Brown, you'll see her. She does a lot of the speaking. She's the like older lady. She wears the purple shirt. She's awesome. I mean, she is amazing. And she is the executive director. So she communicates with the board, and she like calls them and stuff. She does weekly meetings. She really checks in with them. And then there's other people that volunteer and just kind of help out around. So like I'll write to the board. So I pretty much answer to Esther and them. And so that makes us the only organization in the country that's ran by members on death row. And I mean, they started this in 1989 with some of the original board members. Over time, people have been executed. And so the board has changed out over years, and people come and go, and, stuff like that happens. Some people are exonerated. One of our former board members is now with a project called Witness to Innocence, and he serves as an advisor for our board. But that's kind of, we just have been, specifically Esther has been doing this for literally like decades, for years and years. And so there's a lot of really experienced people that work in death penalty abolition. So I don't know if the whole reason I say that is that if there's anyone that really wants to get into, especially if you're in Alabama, if you want to get involved in this kind of work, these type of organizations are really good. There's a lot of people you can learn from. There's people that have been doing this for their entire lives. So there's a lot of really amazing people. I'm really trying to, over these past few days, there's been a lot of stuff happening. I'm really trying to encourage people to like get involved, because you essentially, you do these things, you do the protests, you do the vigils, and you hope that someone like Governor Ivey would change their mind and do the right thing. But they don't. And people end up dying either way. And, I'm trying not to make that as depressing as it is, but that's just the reality. And so the only thing that you truly can do is just build as big of a coalition as you can that just demands something different. And so that's kind of the big focus, especially this year, is trying to just get as many people involved as possible, because what's happening is definitely a testing ground for what could be next. Because we don't know, like, it's one of those things, like, that we are just testing an execution method in this manner. And I don't, it's something I've kind of like, I've thought about it a lot, and it's kind of racked my mind. And it just makes me like, I don't know how to describe it. You know what I mean? Like it just, I don't get it. I can't understand this like commitment to violence that it feels like some people have, because this is one of those issues, and it's usually one of two things: American foreign policy or criminal justice, that turns so many people, especially Americans, into the most reactionary goblins. People get so bloodthirsty when you talk about either of these two things, because so many people just want to feel, I don't know, I don't want to say it's people wanting to feel better, because, we deal with some people that are victims of people that have been murdered. A good example being the most recent, or not the most recent, but the first execution after the moratorium was ended, which we can get into that in a little bit, with James Barber. And we had actually been working with the granddaughter of James's victim. Hey.
Oh, hey, Dawson, can you check your mic real quick? You're like cutting in and out.
Hey. Yeah.
There we go.
Let me kind of like, okay. I'm using like my phone, so I'm hoping that kind of works.
No,
is that good?
Yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm also drinking brisk. I hope that's not.
It's all good. I need to go. I need to go get flavored stuff because I don't have any flavored water or anything left.
But
I had to work earlier, and I had to get gas on the way home, so it's like I'm getting brisk.
Hell yeah!
Like I looked into this like a couple of times since hearing about it, and it's not even like humane for animals.
No, yeah, they don't do it on animals.
No, they don't. Not a single animal. And like I read something where like European and American veterinarians said that if you had to do it, you sedate them first. And then that's not happening in Alabama. They're just straight like the gas.
Yeah, so it's a mask, like, kind of like how if you get surgery and they put the little like just over your nose and mouth thing, that's what they're using, at least as far as we know. That's, like I said, they don't really tell us a lot, but it's going right over here, and they just turn on the gas, and so you pretty much suffocate. And they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what kind of reaction his body will have. I don't want to get, too like gruesome, like there are just stuff that, it's just like the reality of it. We don't know what's going to happen. No one really knows. And probably.
There we go. And we're back.
Okay.
So yeah, we had some technical difficulties, folks. We're back. But yeah, Mark, you were saying they don't even use this on, like, veterinarians are talking about, they don't even use this on animals without sedating people without sedating them first. Dawson, you were saying they're not doing this in this case, and they're putting like a surgical mask on, it seems like, and then we don't know what the fuck's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I mean, we won't really know until after the people that were there to witness it will come out of there and tell us what they saw. And I mean, I don't know. It's the only thing that well, actually, I will say this. One thing that we have found that's been really successful is like trying to target companies that supply things like this. Like, actually, right now, there is a big campaign trying to target the company that's supplying the nitrogen gas. And right now, they're a little bit smaller. They don't have that much social media following. So when people comment or like say something or message them, they definitely see it. And they've just been deleting everything and blocking people. So, it's something. And there are like, if you like keep up, and this is, people like Death Penalty Action that we work with and other organizations, because it's a big, like very big net. lots of local churches, lots of local and national organizations work with us. But if you like keep up with just the different campaigns that we do, and I'll, I can plug social media at the end. I can do all that later. We do like try to have campaigns going against the companies that supply things like that. And that seems to work. That seems to be really successful, and it makes it harder for Alabama and other states to get the drugs or the gas now that they need to actually do the executions. So that seems to be successful.
I wanted to like what you said earlier about when people, there's one or two things that get Americans foaming at the mouth, and that's criminal justice and capital punishment and criminal justice as a whole, but then also like foreign policy, bombing people. It's always shocked me that like the even the most like you probably shouldn't shock me, but it's just a weird contradiction. The most pro-life people are always the ones that are like adamantly for the death penalty. And I remember studying about like Project Innocence in college and realizing that like we have sentenced and put to death people that were exonerated through DNA evidence later. And it goes back to like the fundamental question that it goes back to. And I ask people like, do you believe that the state has the right to kill its citizens? And then that really is just like, oh, I don't know. Like, well, you hate the government, and the same government you hate. Like I'm talking like to reactionaries and conservative Republicans.
Yeah.
They're like, I hate the government, blah, blah, blah. And they're just like, well, do you think the government has the right to execute people and or take people's lives? And they start like, well, and then you bring up like the stuff that they love to talk about, like Ruby Ridge, et cetera, Waco. And like they hate that. But I'm just like, well, they were technically breaking the law. And like these people were breaking the law too, blah, blah, blah. And they just watch their heads explode. And the one person that like the one joke that came up in one of my classes, my college classes, was that one famous person that was innocent put to death by the state being Jesus. It was they like you hear like you put it in that case, they're just like, oh shit, you're right. But it's they just love this like revenge aspect, because the number one thing that people bring up is like, well, imagine if it was your loved one that was killed. I'm like, I mean, that's not my job though. Like, there's a reason why we have a quote, whether you set the nuance aside, if it's, the justice system and its problems or not, you have a justice system because you don't want the vigilante, eye for an eye shit going on. Right. It's like, there's a reason why we don't let families of, of victims say like, hey, this should be this should be the stuff. We have a justice system for that, because every time in U.S. history, it seems like when people like let it up to their own devices, it turns into racist vigilante justice, quote unquote justice. So we have a system in place to prevent that, and we all understand history. We do go back and listen to our other podcast episodes. And so the whole bullshit argument was like, oh, imagine if it was your loved one that was killed. It's just like that doesn't hold any water. Like, you can't. It's not an argument. It's just some bullshit, straw man, knee jerk emotional response that you want people to have. And I mean, my whole thing is like, I would rather have them, be in prison for the rest of their life. Actually, I can't think of a worse. If you actually know about the U.S. prison system, it's hell on earth. Like, I wouldn't wish someone going to like spending time in prison on my worst enemy, because it's absolutely hell, especially Alabama's prisons. We've done a number of episodes on the conditions of Alabama's prisons. But this visceral reaction like they have to wanting to execute these people, and it's like one of those things where like, we read the article. I don't want to bring up what he did, and because that's not important right now. But you hear the responses. They always interview like the victims' families, and they're like, "Hell yeah, I want him to die." Blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like, you're just doing that to play on people's emotions. Like, you're not. Yeah. There's nothing logical or rational about that. It's like, yes, I get that they want him to die, and like they have the right to have the emotion that they want him to die. Like, I get it, but at the end of the day, we do have to look at this as the state of Alabama is performing a science experiment on an American citizen. Yeah. And the only reason they're doing that is because he committed a crime, was found guilty. But let's not forget the context of the jury was like, no, overwhelmingly, was like, you should just let him spend the rest of his life in prison. And one judge that for some fucking reason was like, hey, no, this guy should be put to death. So really, at the end of the day, it's, are you okay with one man saying this person should die? And then what gives that person the right to say that person should die? And it just all boils down to just bullshit. Like, we shouldn't be having this. Like, we shouldn't have this discussion. The death penalty should not be there. It's unjust, no matter how you look at it, especially in a capitalist state that we live in. So this case in particular is just so fucking disturbing because, like I said, we're allowing the state, we're allowing the government to perform essentially a science experiment on a U.S. citizen, and the same type of stuff that we have punished other nations for doing, we're okay with here. It just goes back to the hypocrisy that is, the American experiment, and it's just bullshit. And it's mind-boggling that we're okay with this, but then again, nothing really shocks me about this country anymore.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, so like the thing is, especially with Americans and the way that America and neoliberal late stage capitalism, the way things are is that Americans have a fundamental lack of understanding about where crime comes from. It feels like a lot of people feel like crime is a moral failing, and that it is not just a product of material conditions that lead someone to the option of crime. So, like, to kind of the way I like to talk about it is that, yes, your decision to commit this crime is your decision alone. But the choices you have, the options you have in that moment are a product of your material conditions. It is the fact that you may not have like proper economic care. You may not have proper health care. We don't treat things like drug addiction as an actual disease in this country. It's just your material conditions not being provided, not being able to actually take care of yourself. And sometimes that means crime is your best option. Sometimes things happen, but ultimately it's not about whether or not this person deserves to be killed. It's about whether or not the state deserves to kill someone. And that's the big thing I try to stress, is that it's about not allowing state power to kill people, not allowing the state to have this ability. If they feel it's just, they can kill you. Because I don't know how many people really know that much history. The state doesn't exactly have a good track record of being just and fair and impartial to all people. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's pretty clear, but for whatever reason, like you said, a lot of reactionaries like to say they don't trust the state, they don't trust the government, but then they love to take whatever it says, especially in smaller things, not like coming from the White House or whatever, as like gospel truth, especially when it comes to the criminal justice system and the courts and police departments.
Yeah, as if you really think about it, it's just like having like studied and then teaching about the South, especially and during post Reconstruction into Jim Crow. It's like the same people that foam at the mouth, like that love the fact that we have the death penalty. It's probably the same people whose great grandfather was out there watching lynchings taking place and smiling that it was happening, because they just love this aspect of just revenge. They really do get off on the fact that like someone is deserving of dying because of a crime that they may or may not have committed, because we also know the justice system is not fair whatsoever.
Yeah, that's like the other thing. Other than, the whole material conditions, and I mean, we don't have to get into the technicals of dialectical materialism or anything like that. We do not have to get into that. But the other thing is that conservatives and reactionaries like to do this thing where they are morally superior to other people. That's why, because it's like they can't really be like, oh, like that's why they don't dunk on racists. If someone's being racist, they don't try to dunk on them because it's like, you're calling out your own people. So they just try to find whoever they feel is society's worst people and say, well, I'm better than this person. I can't say I'm not like a racist or, a chauvinist or whatever, or just a general asshole. But I can say I'm better than this guy because I've never killed anyone, even though I definitely have enough, weapons in my house to kill someone. And I definitely think about using them because conservative gun culture is all about wanting to get a free kill. But I haven't killed someone, so I'm better than them. And I have the moral high ground, and I'm able to say, yes, that person should, which, by the way, we're spending so much money to do executions. It's so expensive. I want so much of my tax money to go to kill this one person so the state can show that they're able to shed blood if they feel up to it. And it's just, I don't know, reactionaries like to feel like they're able to get some kind of justice. Like we as a society need to do that. We need to put someone down in order to move on, which, I mean, that's not healing. That's not helping, and that's a whole nother thing. I don't want to speak for the victims, but
yeah. It's an overwhelming like lack of empathy on like I think our society and our culture is just like an overwhelming lack of empathy. I want to talk like kind of bring it back to your organization. So what has been like some of the positive? We could probably touch on negative. We've already touched on negative responses, but what have been some of the positive responses? And who are some other groups and organizations that have like formed coalitions with y'all to try to stop this from happening?
Yeah. Well, the positives are definitely I can't, not necessarily in Alabama because Alabama's very tough on death penalty, but the positives I would say have definitely been that there is a continuously growing coalition of not just like people in the country, but people internationally that have reached out to us, that have expressed their solidarity with us, that have wanted to stand with us and say that what is happening is horrific and barbaric. So some specifics. Death Penalty Action is obviously their national death penalty abolition group, and I along with Esther, the rest of us work really close with a lot of them, and they're awesome. They have a really great team. A lot of states have, say, like Georgia or Florida alternatives to the death penalty. And so there's a lot of different states, especially in the Bible Belt, because that's where most of the executions are. So I believe South Carolina, Georgia, we work with the Georgia one a lot, Florida as well. I'm trying to think. I think also people in Texas. It's a lot of different states. Like most of the death penalty action people come from Oklahoma or Ohio. I'm trying to think who else. I also have, I guess I can go ahead and mention it right now. I have a whole little document of like my notes and links and everything, and I'll send it to you just if people want to like have that. Okay. Sorry about that. We also work with like Equal Justice USA, Amnesty International, ACLU. So it's kind of a very big, like broad umbrella kind of organization. So we really want to like pull in as many people as possible. That's why we also talk to like the Poor People's Campaign here in Alabama, Alabama Arise, which they do more work for like low income communities. That's kind of more their thing because like we try to really stress the connection between people's economic conditions and the motivations that lead someone to committing crime in the first place. Because if executions were an actual effective deterrent, there would never have been a second execution. So that's what we really try to stress, and that's why we really try to be involved with those other advocacy groups.
Is there any like an educational aspect to what y'all do? Like I know there's the policy and there's the pushing out, but like when it comes to, because you're gonna we obviously are gonna run into people who are like adamantly for the death penalty, but like is there any what is what does your organization do, or like what is some tactics or like ways that you have tried to like persuade the public against the death penalty? Because there's obviously people on the fence. You know, I've talked to people that are on the fence who are like, well, blah blah, but this, and I get it, etc. Because and not everyone's foaming at the mouth. So like, what is some educational stuff that y'all do to try to sway people against the death penalty?
The big thing we do is we do try to do a lot of like social media outreach, especially recent. Like Esther is responsible for our Facebook group, and she tries to work with other like online groups, online publications. And then, I run the Instagram. We try to do that. There's a newsletter that comes out every like quarter, and it's actually from the guys in the prison. They type it, print it out there, and it's essays, it's letters, it's poetry, drawings, just it's general, like trying to just let people know that they're here and they're still people, and they still create, and they still love, and they still live lives inside of this prison. And so a big part of the work is trying to just humanize these people and show them that they're people, and everyone deserves to actually try and be rehabilitated, not killed, because that's not helping. That's not creating anything. That's not fixing the problem. You know what I mean? So that's a big part of what we try to do with outreach, and especially that's why we're so appreciative to the other groups we work with, especially people like, we are really appreciative of like, the Alabama ACLU is awesome, and like Amnesty International and Death Penalty Action, because they have such a large reach. I guess also I can mention while we're at it, since I brought up the newsletter, because you can sign up for all this stuff. You can join the emails list and everything, and we send out like actions. And whenever there's vigils, we do lots of like church meetings. We meet with lots of local ministries, churches, synagogues, that kind of thing, and do events there as well. Anyway, the thing I was going to, sorry, I'm kind of, my notes are a little scrambled. I didn't think about how I was going to organize them, so I kind of just did a train of thought. But
I think the entire podcast is like that. It's fine.
Okay, good. That's
all of our
good. That
episodes
makes me
have
feel
been like that. All of our episodes can be described as a bunch of jumbled notes all thrown together.
But there actually is, and this is like, if you go to the Instagram, there's a link tree, and it just has, all of our stuff. There's the donate button. There's the book. And this is what I'm trying to get to, is Ghost of the Over the Boiler. It's a book of just collections of poetry, like I said, essays, writings, that kind of thing, that are from the guys in Holman. And so that's something we try to do, is just because that's also like a fundraising thing, and that helps us like actually be able to fund the like going to events, that kind of thing. But we try to like, just like I said, try to humanize people and just get out there in our community. Especially a big thing is getting with like people of local faiths and churches and that kind of thing, because try to get people, especially, understand like people in Alabama care about Christian values. So put your money where your mouth is. Follow the faith leaders in the state. Follow what the people that you care so much about what they say. Well, listen to what they're saying. Listen to what the people, like what the organizations that we work with say. Just, I don't know. It becomes so frustrating sometimes, because you tend to have the same conversations over and over again. And part of that is like, people always have the same like 2 to 3 things that they'll bring up. Sorry, I'm also checking the updates. Nothing yet. People say the same like 2 to 3 things to try to counter talking about executions, try to justify why it's needed. The big one being like, what if someone is like a predator of any type? And I guess, that's kind of a warning for other people, if they're listening. Okay. Real quick, can we take a quick break? I'm sorry.
And we're back. Dawson, you talked about something before we took a break there.
Yeah.
About like the Bible Belt and like talking about like trying to go to the Christian values, because it's always the ones that are most adamantly like conservative Christians, et cetera, that tend to be the most pro death penalty. But it seems like we were talking about the guy's spiritual advisor, and you said, why don't you come and pray with us in the execution chamber? Why don't you watch this if you think it's safe, et cetera, et cetera? Like playing on that, like, the moral Christian values of Governor Meemaw and the Republicans in the state. And it's just, it just seems like it never works. And it's always really, really telling, because I know like anyone not in the South knows that there's a distinct difference in when we talk about the church in the South. There's the white church, which is predominantly conservative Republican, and the black church, which is predominantly progressive and radical and has been the foundation for a lot of the civil rights movement, a lot of like positive change in the South. And obviously when we talk about this, the black church is going to be the ones that are anti-death penalty and really stick to the message of Jesus, of love thy neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And the white church is going to be the ones that are like, no, kill them all. And it really, really, with these type of situations, especially when you're trying to, like, the Governor Meemaw, who prides herself as, this great crusader, quote unquote anti-woke, preach the Christian moral American values, right, is the same one who's like, we're going to take COVID money and build a super duper big prison, and we're going to keep executing people, even if we have to like use them as science experiments. And it really is for anyone like outside the South that, probably doesn't see like that aspect of it. And when we talk about the church and we talk about religion in the South, I tend to, shit on the Pacific Northwest again. It's always the Pacific Northwest people and like, Yankees that, anytime they hear like a Southern politician, especially black Southern politicians, like any Southern Democratic politicians, bringing up like the church and community, they always like roll their eyes like, but the church, blah, 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 because they automatically think of like the white reactionary Klan church. And they don't realize that there is a progressive grassroots community in the black church that really is the catalyst for a lot of change in the South. And this is coming from somebody, and obviously like I'm not religious, the podcast is not religious. We're not promoting Christianity in any way, shape, or form. It's just when there needs to, like, people really need to realize there's a staunch difference when we talk about the church in the way in the South, and how religion can be sometimes used as a tool for radical change, and it also can be used as for oppression. And I think this is a clear-cut case of that. Like I said, you see obviously the black community, the black church being like, hey, the death penalty is wrong. This is bullshit. This is not what, Jesus talked about. And you have Governor Meemaw and the white church saying, no, kill them all. We need vengeance, et cetera, et cetera. So I really, when you said, and I did read that when his spiritual advisor was like, come pray with us in the execution chamber. Obviously Governor Meemaw is not going to do that. And no God-fearing conservative person is going to do that, because they're hypocrites. Like they're really, at the end of the day, they're full of shit. And this is really bringing that to the forefront that, hey, they are full of shit. They would much rather, the sweating, like Phil Oaks, the sweating of their souls can't wash the blood from their hands. Like they can go to church every Sunday and pray and pray and pray and wail and whatever. But every other day of the week, they're like, fucking execute them, kill them, bomb them. They're full of shit.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, I want to give everyone, they just released another update. This came at 8:30, so this is, this will come out later. I don't know when, but, January 25th, 8:30, Alabama Governor Kay Ivey confirms that Kenneth Smith has been executed by nitrogen hypoxia, the first U.S. execution of its kind. And she said the execution was lawfully carried out by nitrogen hypoxia, the method previously requested by Mr. Smith as an alternative to lethal injection. At long last, Mr. Smith got what he wanted, and this case can be finally put to rest, said Governor Ivey. Smith's time of death was 8:25 p.m. So sorry to kind of, drop that in there, but I wanted to go ahead and bring it up since this is being recorded as it's happening. So it's very current, so to speak. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to put that in there. Going back to what you were saying about just the kind of different church cultures, and it usually just falls between sometimes political ideologies, and that how that interacts with different types of identity too is kind of its own conversation. But I think it is not a coincidence that the type of churches and religious organizations that we work with are usually the ones that are the most loving and the most accepting, and they're so accepting of everyone, and they make the place feel incredibly safe, and they bring so much support and love and passion with them. They really bring so much radical edge to our messaging, because they truly feel, and it doesn't matter what kind of religion they are, they truly feel in their heart of hearts that righteousness and justice is on their side. And so these are the groups. This is why we really try to do a lot of church outreach, because those are the groups that when they stand with us really make a big difference. We also reach out to a bunch of other groups. We really recently got very close with Birmingham's DSA. They're awesome. They're amazing people. But I don't want to get on another tangent. I don't know. It's just with the different churches, because, you hear people are very opinionated and will tell you that this is justice. This is divine justice. This is God's wrath, eye for an eye. People love to say that all the time. And I mean, I don't really want to get too much into the weeds of the religion and theology and stuff, because I mean, that's not really pertinent to what we do. But it's just, I don't know. I think that anytime, especially in the South, that there is radical movements, it comes from this feelings that God has called me to do this thing. That is, I mean, God bless him, as probably insane he was. John Brown did what he did because he thought that God told him to go on his mission. Yeah, I mean, he did it because that's what he thought he was supposed to do, and whether or not that's really what happened, I don't know. I can't say that. They didn't exactly have great mental health treatment back then, so I don't know. But either way, it still did a really radical, positive thing that is still to this day really moving people in radical ways, that is inspiring people to do things to fight for abolition, even if it's different today than it would be in his time.
Long-time listeners will remember from our John Brown episode that we all agree that John Brown was batshit crazy, but did the right thing. What did we say? We said
Joan of Arc reincarnated.
Joan of Arc reincarnated. It was the last time God spoke to. This is the only time God spoke to a white man, and he did the right thing.
Yeah. Long-time listeners remember when I told poor friend of the show, Chris Deere, that I thought that his idol probably had a cult of personality.
I mean, it's he's off base, but he's he's kind of right. He's kind of steady.
It's what? God talked to you, buddy. You lopped off the heads of fucking plantation owners. Let's fucking go. It's better than fucking Jim Jones or anyone else. Oh my god. Kai, did you have something to say earlier? I know you unmuted and then
no, it just as much as we're trying to keep ourselves our mood up and everything, it's just incredibly stark to hear about somebody's death while we are recording an episode of what's happening. And it's, I kind of sit here dissociating, listening to you guys talk, staring out into the distance, thinking that this is not the first time that our collective country, because all of us are Americans in some form, our collective country, even if it is just in Alabama, that we have performed an experiment that is meant to result in death on somebody.
Yeah.
And it's so like, it feels like I just shot out of my body just trying to like deal with that information as it's happening.
Right, just because someone's considered a second-class citizen now because they're in prison, it's okay, it's allowed.
Yeah, and I cannot help but be one of those people who kind of ruminates on that and thinking about the sheer terror that somebody must feel, especially if they won't even sedate them.
Yeah,
I can't even.
And it's the second time he's been through it too.
Yeah,
and the first one was really like, for anyone who's been to the doctor has to get blood drawn. How just a feeling that like it took like 2 hours they spent trying to find a vein,
assault.
and then tried to get one like near his heart, and until it finally stopped. It was just like, I can't even imagine being strapped down to a table and having somebody prod me with a needle trying to find a vein to kill me.
And I mean, the protocol is like, you're not allowed to eat at a certain like hours before or have any liquids a certain time before. So it's like, no wonder.
Disadvantage.
Yeah, and you're in like such a intense psychological state. Like, of course, this person isn't healthy. What do you expect?
I understand that what I'm about to ask probably sounds incredibly naive, and I understand that. But like, how does this not go against cruel and unusual punishment?
Right, stabbing.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so that's kind of the weird thing, is that it's not cruel and unusual punishment because Alabama says so. And because Alabama says so and the Supreme Court says so, it's not cruel and unusual punishment. And that's kind of where we're at with it. Because it's like kind of one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of discourse over whether or not we call this like a gas chamber, which the way I see it is that this is, you are strapped in a confined room and you are forced to breathe in a fatal gas, but it's not a gas chamber. It's, what else would you call it? It just because it's like painted walls and there's medical equipment there doesn't make it any different from what this is. But because it's kind of like everything in the late stage capitalism we live in, everything is painted to be really pretty. But if we can just relabel it what it is, if we just relabel slavery as prison labor, then you can still do it. If you kind of reintroduce like child labor, you can still do it, but make it like nice, kind of make it like cleaner. And so that this is the same thing. It's just like a cleaning up of what the state and the government has been doing for years and years.
Dawson, is there any like update about what happened? Like, did anything, how they, I know this is such a morbid thing, but that was the concern.
Yeah, like
don't know how this was going to go.
At the moment, from what I have seen, is they haven't like released anything. I'm sure that like it happened at around 8:30, so I think like Jeff is probably out of the room now. He's probably meeting with the other people that are there at Holman. But at this current moment, I haven't heard anything. They do have like currently, and I'm sure, people can go back and watch it later. They're doing a live virtual vigil, and they'll do one during each like execution. So I think at this moment, people are just most likely collecting together and mourning and just spending time with one another. And then from there, getting everyone and like going. But I don't know at this current moment. Besides that, as far as I know, I feel like we would know if something happened. So, like God hoping, Jeff is okay. I've been, watching my phone and I haven't seen anything. No one's reached out to me. Like Esther, actually, I have an email from Esther. I can look. I promise I'm a professional.
Well, you're the only one who's professional. It's fine. We're not professional.
Okay, so yeah, nothing really. I think Jeff is okay. As okay as he can be from what I'm hearing. And, it was by all of Alabama's accounts successful. So I guess just from here, at this point, and this is usually after we have executions, is just at least for me, I write to the board at Holman. I'll like write them physical letters. That's usually how we communicate because it can kind of be difficult otherwise. They're very they have, very strict rules, obviously. But and then we just kind of like regroup and then we go from there and then just kind of use the time we can to build up a broader coalition before the next one is announced, which is at any time. I mean, we don't know. It could be within a week or it could be a few months. We don't know. It's pretty much up to the whim of like the powers that be, so to speak, but it's completely arbitrary. And who it is and what they want to do and like when, it's up to them.
And now this is going to open the door. If this was a successful execution, like you said, Alabama's going to start doing it more. And now the other states are going to look at this and be like, okay, we can use this now instead of with the trying to find these drugs and experiment the drugs. We can all now just use nitrogen gas. So now this has opened up the floodgates for more executions. So this is just a horrible case all the way around.
I mean, we could see an uptick in executions now that this has gone successfully, quote unquote. So and that's a big consistent factor in this type of work, is consistently being left in the dark and having to piece together the story through letters to the men that are in there and like figuring out what's going on from their perspective, trying to get whatever information you can out of the Department of Corrections and trying to get whatever you can out of like maybe people that that are willing to talk to you, and just piecing together what Alabama and any other state is actually trying to do, what they want to do and what their next move is. And we usually don't know until they make an official announcement. And the way that it's changed now since the moratorium ended is that the powers that the governor and just Alabama, like Supreme Court and everything has in general, they're a lot broader. The windows of opportunity to execute are wider. There is less of a time between the execution announcement and the execution day now. So there's a lot of just like broader abilities that the governor specifically has at her disposal. That's a big reason why a lot of what we do is directly targeted at Kay Ivey, because oftentimes with these executions, we go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and Kay Ivey is usually the one with the power, her and her alone, that can stop the execution. And time again, she doesn't, which is disappointing, but not surprising.
Yeah. She's definitely not one, along with all her other Republican cohorts, not one to stop an execution because they love it. It goes back to what we said before. They just foam at the mouth at this.
Yeah, they love the blood. They do it for the sport.
They really do, and it's sick.
They're willing to lose money on it.
No, yeah, exactly. Because like you said, you don't really understand how expensive it is to do this and the appeal process and all the stuff that goes in it, but they don't care because they just want to execute somebody. Kai, Mark, do you guys y'all have anything you want to say before we wrap it up? No.
Jeez, no.
Yeah, I know this
No.
is very heavy.
Yeah.
Like I come from a state that is famous for its executions. Come from Florida. You remember watching newscasts of people having parties outside of prisons when gosh, who was it? I'm gonna have to look this up now.
Was it
Might have been Bundy,
Florida,
because
yeah,
I'm
I was going
pretty
to say,
old.
did Florida kill Bundy?
Yeah, I remember very vaguely watching like people have parties outside the prison when they executed him.
Yeah.
And when I was listening to you guys talk about like what is the root cause of especially people in the South being so fanatical about enacting physical punishments, physical violence, when it comes to these kinds of things, and I started thinking about, you know, like my whole 2 years of a psychology degree under my belt, and thinking like, well, a lot of this could kind of come down to authoritarianism and accepting what an authority has said because the authority is the authority, and being predisposed towards authoritarianism because of X, Y, and Z. And it does actually kind of fold into the white church as opposed to the black church, because a lot of white churches foster authoritarianism in their flock, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And just like, I can't dig down deep enough to understand it fully. Just kind of the floor taken out from under you when you hear that a human being was just killed by the state. And no digging in my own head with with my limited expertise, my limited knowledge, is going to come up with a reason why, as much as I want a reason why.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I can add to this right now.
Yeah, after James Barber's execution, and this was the first execution after the moratorium ended. I kind of found myself in a similar place, not getting it fully, and just feeling like the feeling of going to somewhere where you know the governor is, being outside there, going inside, delivering the petitions, talking to the assistant, knowing that the governor is going to at least hear about it. And to just know that the people that you're supposed to like, that are supposed to represent you, that are supposed to abide by the will of the people, don't care. And that's hard to reckon with, and that's hard to reason with. And it's hard to reason with the fact that we have representation and we live in a like type of like political and economic system that is ruthless and does not care. And the only thing we truly have is each other and the people we organize alongside with, and the people that we meet, and the people that we get to like learn from and love. That's all we have. And so we just have to keep moving forward. We have to like remember the people that we've lost, but remember that there are other people that are still alive, and there's still an opportunity to save someone else's life. And we have to take advantage of the time that we have now that there isn't an execution coming up, to build a broader coalition and demand change, because we have to take away the option to say no. And that's the only thing that's going to truly change anything.
Yeah. That was perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Dawson, where can we find you and your organization on social media? Is there anything you want to plug as well?
It's just Project Hope to Abolish the Death Penalty, big name. So I run the Instagram, so it's just PHADP.AL. So it's just Project Hope to Abolish the Death Penalty, Alabama. I run the Instagram. Esther runs the Facebook. So she's really awesome about posting lots of articles and links and everything, really keeping people informed. So if you go onto the Instagram, there's a link tree, and that has our website, which we post updates, the board meetings, pretty much everything that we have going on day to day is going up there. And then Facebook, Instagram, there's a link that shows you Ghost Over the Boiler, which is the book we have. And then there's a donate button if you feel like supporting us. It's greatly appreciated. And then from there, we also just collaborate and support all the other organizations. So if you just follow us there and just keep up with us, I'm pretty good about like posting and trying to stay up to date and trying to make sure like whatever is happening at the moment, is happening. So yeah, also if you want to reach out and message, because I will most likely respond as long as you're, not being a creep or a freak. But I will respond. And if you want to get involved, reach out and talk to us, because we love having people show up, especially when we do events.
Hell yeah. And that is, if I just post the link tree in the show notes, will that take to
Yeah, for sure.
As well? Okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So so tired. At What's Left of the South, we believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons, those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, and self-determination for all oppressed peoples. Make sure to check out our link tree in the show notes to find all of our social media, Spotify playlist, our merch store, and subscribe to our Patreon to hear our After Dark series, where we might have Dawson back to talk about a certain grocery store.
Anytime.
Our producer is Mr. Speaker. Our theme music is by the band The Last Thing Remember, edited by Psychotic Refuge. We are coming to you from the Magic City, Birmingham, Alabama, as well as Sweet Georgia and jolly old England. We'd also like to recognize that we're recording on occupied land that rightfully belongs to the Muskogee and Creek Nation. As always, thank you, Dawson, for coming on. Hopefully one day there won't be a need for your organization because we won't have the death penalty anymore. Yeah, and I pray that day comes.
Thank you guys so much. One day we will see abolition.
Hell yeah.
Love and solidarity to you guys. Thank you so much.
America. I agree. Mark, sweet Mark. What's that ancient wisdom you got for us?
Don't let the big
God damn it, Mark.
Bite. You gave it.
Mark's gonna go lay on the road now.
I am.